Good morning, everyone. I thank you again for joining me for another day text. Sorry I was not available last Friday or this past weekend. I had scheduled both a day text on Friday and Saturday, but things have just been so busy in a good way that I had to change plans and adjust my schedule. So I had a show set to go for last Sunday as well. But because of the way things are going, just in good ways, very busy, lots happening, I wasn't able to do the show. So what I'm going to do is starting this Sunday, we'll do our series beginning with Micah 5 on pre-Christian evidence that Jesus is the biblical Messiah. So we'll start that show, or we'll start that series this Sunday. And it'll be a great show. I've got a lot of material, good stuff for us to talk about. I just wasn't able to get it all set and ready to go this past Sunday. So I think it'll be a better show for it. And we'll get to the texts here in just a moment. We're going to start with the letter of 2 Peter. It will be our first day text in the letter of 2 Peter. So I'm going to go over a little bit of information about the manuscript history, what it is that gives us confidence in the text of 2 Peter. And if you haven't joined us before, during these day texts, what I do is I group together texts that pertain to a specific subject, and I use what I've translated in the Great Message and other related texts. So occasionally we may skip some material just because I haven't translated it yet. But otherwise, we go through the material on a regular basis so that we can better understand these early Christian and pre-Christian letters and documents, all of which pertain to the God Jah and to the one whom we believe he sent forth. All right, let's get to the text then, and then we'll talk a little bit more about this Sunday's show. So, okay, 2 Peter, like the rest of the New Testament, letters and documents, has excellent manuscript authority. It has support in early papyri, in the Bodmer Papyri, P72, dated to about the 3rd, maybe 4th century. It's also contained in the 3 great codices, Vaticanus, Sinaiticus, and Alexandrinus, all around the 4th century CE, or around 250 or so years after Peter wrote his letter, 250 to 300 years, depending on when he wrote it. As well as we also have representation in 2 Peter in the various language versions, Coptic, Syriac, Armenian, Georgian, and others. So it's a credible text, just like every other biblical book that we have. It's based on a wealth of manuscript authority that is very close to the time when the letter was written. So our earliest texts of 2 Peter are over 1,500 years old, but they're only a couple hundred years from the time when Peter actually wrote his letter. Okay, so we're going to start in chapter 2. I haven't translated chapter 1 yet, and we're going to read one verse from chapter 2 and then another verse from chapter 3. Remember, we're grouping these together according to what I've done so far in terms of translating. All right, so 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4. I'm going to read verse 4 and the note with it. I may make a comment, or I'll just jump to chapter 3, verse 8. 2 verses today in our day text, but they contain a lot of good information. All right, chapter 2, verse 4 says, "For surely God did not spare sinning angels, but by confining them with chains of darkness, he delivered them to a judgment that is reserved for them." And then if we take a look at the note that I put in, a judgment that is reserved. Reserved here means that the judgment has been made based on what the angels did during the time before the flood. But it's being temporarily held back or reserved until the time when Jah executes full judgment upon all living things. And then in verse 8 of chapter 3, it makes the point that, dearly beloved, do not ignore this one thing. A single day with the Lord is as 1,000 years. and 1,000 years as one day. So Jah definitely relates to time. He just uses a time scale different than ours. So when we consider time, we'll get back to chapter 2, verse 4 in just a moment, but this relates to that because Jah has been confining these rebellious sons of God in chains of deep darkness. And you note the metaphor used there, chains, right? We use chains. But here, chains are a metaphor for a bonding agent that is composed of darkness. It's different than the type of chain, that we use. It's a metaphor, and we understand what it represents, right? Confinement, bondage, binding, until the time of the judgment has been declared fully. So with Jah, we have in our world, you saw if you've seen the Avengers Endgame movie, it's very heavily based on time travel, but it's not realistic. It's not possible. There is not an infinite series of events repeating themselves over and over and over again so that you could access them backwards and forwards in time travel. It's not possible. Events occur, they take place, and people move on. You can't go back and change it. And a lot of these movies, when they deal with time travel and that, they try to undo consequences, right? And you really can't undo consequences. You can modify consequences, or you can do something again and do better, right? But you cannot erase what has happened. You just have to deal with it. You have to live with it and accept it and not pretend like it never happened. See, then you're just delusional and you're fooling yourself so that you don't have to deal with something that maybe you're not proud of or that's difficult to deal with. But if you did something and you need to deal with it, well, stop running from it and deal with it. It's not going to go away just because you don't like what happened. We all have situations like that. Now, the angels who sinned against Jah had no reason. They were like Adam and Eve before they sinned, and the devil, who chose on their own what to do in spite of having no reason to do otherwise, in spite of having no reason to abuse Jah's creation. They chose to do so in ways that were beyond what Jah allowed after Adam and Eve fell. And so while the sons of God may have come down thinking they could take advantage of humans because we were sinning, and that the Father may allow that because, well, in their mind, they're just punishing us for sins, that's not how Jah saw it. Jah saw it as their obligation to try to help us, the way Jesus did. And we see that when he came and how he acted. The earlier sons of God who came down before the flood were not like that. We can see that in the remnants of the things that they built and the destruction that followed. Now back to time for a moment. So when we relate to time, right? We relate to time based on our position on the earth relative to the sun, moon, and stars, and the rotation of the earth, and all of these working together to create a system by which we can measure the time of day and the time of night consistently and base our activities and our plans around it. It's so consistent. Well, with Jah, he can enter into our world and therefore experience these kinds of conditions that involve daylight, nighttime, and how our rotation and position on the earth relative to others in different locations make it more or less dark or light. And so Jah can interact with us in the conditions in which he made us to experience these things and therefore be able to calculate time, to measure events in relation to each other as they occur. But Jah, he has a lot of different ways, probably, but at least one that is different from ours in the sense that his measurement is just bigger. One day is as 1,000 years. So in the same way that we use the earth and the sun and the stars and their movements that are all predictable, right? This isn't chaos. It's all very well organized and set in place. That's why we can use it so well. Well, Jah, he could use, whereas we use the sun, the earth, and the moon and stars, he could use whole solar systems, whole galaxies, their movement in relation to each other. So he could be using a cosmic clock, you could say, composed of things that while we know are there and see, we don't see them as they rotate in the ways that would allow us to measure our events in relation to each other as they occur. the way we do with the things that we can see and understand more readily, the sun, the earth, the moon, and the stars we observe. But Jah and the angels, they could have a whole nother system, either, like I said, based on these larger cosmic elements, or even just elements in realms we don't see or witness, like spirituality. But what we see and what's made in our universe and realm that we use is what they put in place. So they would have to have something similar in ways that they then modeled our world and universe after. And so this is why when we consider Jah and his way of doing things, we get our time, but we're on Jah's time, okay? We are on Jah's time. When he says this, that's what's going to happen. If he allows this, that will be allowed. But we all are given a certain measure of time to use, to show Jah what we're like, and to learn and to grow and to become better, and to treat others the way we want to be treated. That's how we were made. So do not become downhearted or think in any way that there's some delays or that things take too long. That's not the case at all. We should be thankful for the time we have. Just think, if Jah had come or sent his son 50 or 100 years ago, would we be here? No. So Jah wanted us to be here. It's Jah's will that we are here. Not that judgment was executed 100 years ago and that we didn't get to come. His will is that we come first. And when he says the last generation is here and this will be the end of the current system, then that is when it comes. Not when we calculate events, not when we interpret prophecies in certain ways, not because we're having a hard time and we just don't know why Jah's waiting, right? That's not what it's about. It's about Jah. Everything is Jah. Always Jah. Without Jah, there's no you, there's no me, there's no anybody. And Jah allows even those who oppose him to exist until their time is up. So Jah deserves praise. This is why Jesus says there's one who is seeking glory. He knew the one, his Father. So we give Jah praise every day. We should. And we try to with these day texts and our videos. But apart from all these things, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you can and should praise Jah. He is the one who allows all these things, good and bad, to continue for the purpose of a judgment, so that everybody gets to show what we're made of and what we stand for. And don't worry about those who seem to die prematurely or who are aborted or who are killed and they don't seem. Jah knows. He will give them their opportunity that we are not aware of in ways that we cannot manage. Plus, we don't know if children or infants who are born or die when they're first born, we don't know what they would have become, right? So it's not proper for us to judge Jah or to ask him, why do you let these young children die and they didn't get a chance to do anything? Well, we don't really know what they would have done. Maybe they would have been worse in ways that Jah didn't want them to have that life. I don't know. We cannot determine the things that Jah and these higher beings can determine. We can only determine where we go, if Jah allows it. So we should concentrate on what we have control over, not get our minds caught up in things that really we can't figure out anyway. That is, as far as answering for others who may not have had the same full opportunity to live life like we have. That's for Jah to handle. He's the source of life. You don't think he can give that child or that person life again if they didn't have the full judgment necessary? That's ridiculous. So we should focus on ourselves and everybody around us that we can help and promote Jah. Okay, we know we have to live in the world. We know not everybody loves Jah, or even if they love God, they don't know him as Jah. And that's okay. We're here to do what we believe is right and to help others to see the light if they want it. If they don't want it or they want to do something else, they get that opportunity too. So keep doing the best you can do. We cannot control, and nor should we try to control anybody. We should just try to help them to see the right things, to influence them in the right directions, so that they can become the best person they can be the way Jah made us to be, and hopefully give him praise. So, some good things for us today. We know that Jah has confined the angels from the pre-flood days. That's why it's different, right? Before the flood, it was different. They were allowed to come down, descend, build these things that are now just remnants of destruction. But they don't do that anymore. Or if the spirits do, they're involved with us in other ways, like we see with the princes of Persia and Greece and Daniel and other texts. We know the devil is behind these kingdoms, and all the other angels and Jah and his son are involved too. This is a big deal for them. They're very involved in ways we don't always see, but that we can see the effects of what they're doing. So they're not at all far away. They're very active until the final day. We just don't see it because we cannot see them all the time. Their time is different from our time. But let's focus on the time we have and not worry about what they're doing. They know what they're doing. We know what we're doing. Focus on what you're doing and get the job done. Let Jah handle his judgment. Let the Son and the angels deal with the wicked spirits and others who are competing for different people. We have to do the best we can to praise Jah, promote Jesus, and treat others the way we want to be treated. If we do those things, we'll be all right. We'll be all right now, in the future, and in the coming age. So it's some good information for us to keep in mind. It's the only way really to go right. Even if we choose our own way and we become wicked like the ancient sons of God, well, we're just being prepared for a judgment. So one way or the other, we have to go through. The question is, will we live on? Depends on Jah. That's why we praise him. So we recommend that you do the same. And if you want to learn more about Jah, let us know what we can do to help you. We have a lot of videos and things on the channel and in some of my sites that will give you more information about the God Jah and the history of humankind and why so many people today who promote evolution and things that have no scientific basis at all, and in fact are contradicted by science, are misleading many people. So we try to help in those ways, but we are very much behind people choosing their own course. We want to help. We want to see people choose the right course, but we don't force people because that wouldn't be right. That's not the way Jah does it. He gives us the opportunity to choose. We just hope everyone chooses right. So we're here to help in that regard. That's it. That's our whole purpose, to praise Jah, promote Jesus, and help other people do the same things. That's really what it's all about. And that's why we do these day texts. So I hope you'll join me tomorrow as we continue through the letter of 2 Peter. And I'll try to be consistent all this week with the day texts. We will, Jah willing, do our Sunday show. We're going to start a new series of videos on pre-Christian evidence that Jesus is the biblical Messiah. And I'm going to start with Micah chapter 5. I was going to do this last Sunday. I just got a little busy. Things are really good secular-wise, so I'm thankful to Jah for that. And we'll just keep giving him back his due and the glory that he should have as much as we can. So I hope you'll join me for this Sunday's talk about the pre-Christian evidence pointing to Jesus as the Messiah. We're going to do a series, so it'll be an ongoing series of review of texts like Micah 5, Isaiah 53, Zechariah 12. We'll do a show on each text, pre-Christian text that we have pre-Christian manuscript evidence for. So it's not like a text people could say was written after Jesus. This series is going to be about pre-Christian texts only. That doesn't mean those are the only texts that identify Jesus. That is, texts that we have evidence of before Jesus lived, like in the Dead Sea Scrolls. But we have so many texts that are preserved that are dated to the time before Jesus that it's good for us to do a series that highlights those texts, the manuscript evidence for them, and the things that they foretold in connection with the Messiah that Moses spoke about in Deuteronomy 18, the prophet who would come like him and speak in Jah's name, just like in Micah 5. So all these texts relate to the same thing, and that is the one who would come and release humankind from sin and death in Jah's name. And we believe that person is Jesus. So we're going to highlight the evidences we have, the best evidence that points to him as the one whom Jah sent to the earth. So I thank all of you for joining me. I appreciate it. Good to see you all in the chat. And we'll be back tomorrow for another day text in 2 Peter as we work our way to this Sunday's show on the pre-Christian evidence pointing to Jesus as the Messiah.